The prairie was glowing gold when Nancy Ellery spotted the Mustang. Its dark coat shimmered beneath the sinking sun, but the way it favored its front leg made her heart twist. She clicked her tongue, urging her mare forward, determination in her every move. Injured horses never survived long in this country, with coyotes prowling and water growing scarce. As she dismounted and approached slowly, a sudden burst of hooves thundered behind her. Nancy spun, hand on her rope. A tall stranger on a bay gelding slid to a halt, dust swirling around him. He tipped his hat with a lopsided grin. "Evenin', ma'am. Looks like we got the same idea." Nancy narrowed her eyes. "That's so, 'cause from where I stand, this horse don't need two rescuers." The man chuckled. "Name's Charles Avery. I was tracking him since noon. Hurt himself. Jumpin' a ravine." Nancy stiffened. "Nancy Ellery. And this is my land. Mustangs cross it. I care for M." Charles slid off his horse, hands raised in peace. "Fair enough, but he's spooked and hurt. You'll need help." The Mustang snorted, struggling to stand before wobbling dangerously. Instinct overrode Nancy's pride. "Fine, but follow my lead." They approached slowly from each side, talking low and quiet. Nancy noticed how Charles kept his movements smooth, respectful. He'd worked with horses before, she could tell. Together, they eased a rope around the Mustang's neck and gently guided him toward a shaded patch of grass. Nancy crouched beside him, examining the wound, not broken, just swollen. Relief softened her voice. Charles knelt beside her, close enough she could feel the warmth of him. "You've got good hands," he murmured. She stiffened again. Compliments were dangerous. They wormed past walls she couldn't afford to lower, just doing what needs doing. Charles smiled. "My kinda woman." Nancy rolled her eyes, but heat crept up her neck. She focused on the Mustang, tying a poultice of crushed sage and cool mud. Charles held the horse steady, humming low. His presence was annoyingly calming. When the sun dipped fully, the prairie turned copper and shadows stretched long. Nancy stood, dusting off her palms. "He'll need to rest overnight. I'll bring him to my barn." Charles brushed dirt from his jeans. "Want help leadin' him?" A pause. Nancy wasn't used to letting anyone in literally or figuratively, but the Mustang needed two sets of hands. "Fine," she muttered. Together, they guided the weary Mustang across the prairie. The wind softened, brushing their shoulders like an old friend, and for a moment, Nancy felt something unfamiliar relief, maybe, or something warmer. Charles walked beside her, quiet, for once. The sky burned orange as they approached the ranch. Sparks, at sundown, and Nancy wasn't sure if they were coming from the sky or from the stranger walking beside her. The barn lantern flickered warm light across the rafters as Nancy guided the injured Mustang inside. Charles walked beside her, keeping a gentle hand near the horse's neck. He'd been quiet the whole way from the prairie, and Nancy didn't know if that made her more uneasy or strangely comfortable. The Mustang let out a soft grunt as they settled him into a freshly bedded stall. Nancy tightened the gate latch, then brushed her palms on her jeans. "He'll pull through," she said, more to herself than to Charles. Charles leaned on the stall door, watching the Mustang breathe. "You did good tonight." Nancy crossed her arms. "Compliments? Again." "He ain't safe yet." "No," Charles said softly, "but he's safe with you." That disarmed her more than she cared to admit. Nancy headed toward the tack room and tossed him a clean cloth. "Here, you're covered in trail dust." "So are you," he chuckled. She ignored him. The barn fell into a quiet rhythm. Crickets. Outside, the rustle of hay, the Mustang's slow breaths. Nancy moved with practiced ease, preparing herbal compresses for the horse's leg. Charles watched her hands work, impressed. "You know," he said, "most folks wouldn't bother with a wild one. Takes heart." Nancy paused. "Horses don't choose their trouble. People do." Charles studied her. "Sounds like you're speaking from experience." Her jaw tightened. "Ain't your business." He lifted his hands in surrender. Fair enough. Still, she could feel his eyes on her, curious, kind, and patient. Like he understood she was a locked gate he wasn't meant to force open. When they finished tending to the horse, Charles leaned against the post, arms crossed. "So, Nancy Ellery, what's a woman like you doing on a ranch all by yourself?" She bristled. "I'm not alone. I've got a crew." "That's not what I meant." Nancy shot him a look sharper than barbed wire. "Charles, I don't need saving. And I don't need questions." Charles held her gaze. "Maybe not. But everyone needs someone." Nancy turned away before he saw how those words hit her. The lantern dimmed, crackling with low flame. Outside, the sky was deep violet, stars dusting the horizon. Nancy closed the barn door halfway, leaving a space for the night breeze. "You stay in town long?" she asked casually, hoping her tone didn't give anything away. "Depends," he said. "On what?" "On whether a certain cowgirl wants me around." Nancy felt heat rise in her chest. She swallowed. "You're too smooth for your own good." He grinned. "You ain't seen smooth yet." She rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips, rare, unguarded. Before she could answer, the Mustang whinnied sharply. Charles was by her side in an instant, the two of them checking the horse's leg, shoulders brushing as they knelt. The moment was warm, close, electric. Too close. Nancy stepped back. "You should get going. Storm's cumin." Charles grabbed his hat, but lingered at the door. "You ever need help? You know where to find me." Nancy watched him disappear into the night, her heart beating louder than the incoming thunder. And for the first time in years, someone had gotten past her walls. Rain hammered the roof like 1,000 galloping hooves. The barn shuddered in the wind as Nancy lit another lantern, checking on the Mustang. His leg was worse than she expected, swollen, stiff, trembling. "Easy, boy," she whispered, running a calming hand along his neck. "You've got to hold on." Lightning cracked, illuminating the night through the gaps in the boards. The ranch hands were stuck in town, waiting out the storm, and Nancy was alone until a knock thudded on the barn door. Phew. She grabbed a pitchfork, instincts sharp. "It's me." Charles' voice cut through the wind. She threw the door open. Charles stood soaked to the bone, hair plastered to his forehead, shirt clinging to every line of muscle. "Storm washed the bridge out," he said. "Hope you don't mind. I came back." Nancy blinked. "Mind? You almost scared me to death." His grin softened. "Didn't mean to. Thought you could use some help." She wanted to say. She didn't, but the truth pressed against her ribs. "Fine," she muttered. "Come in." Thunder cracked again, shaking the barn. Charles joined her beside the Mustang. "He don't look good." "No," she admitted, voice tight. "He's fightin' infection." Charles rolled up his sleeves. "Tell me what you need." Nancy handed him water and herbs, mixing a poultice as she talked him through it. Their hands brushed, quick, warm, startling. Nancy tried to ignore the jolt that shot through her. "You cold?" Charles asked. "No," she lied. He shrugged off his soaked coat and draped it around her shoulders. The gesture was gentle, intimate. Nancy froze. "Charles." He met her gaze, blue eyes, soft, steady. "You don't always have to be the strong one." She looked away, throat tight. "I don't know how to be anything else." A long moment stretched between them, quiet as the eye of the storm. Then the Mustang cried out again. They worked for hours, cleaning the wound, cooling the fever, murmuring calm words as wind roared outside. At one point, lightning flashed so bright it lit the barn like daylight. Nancy gasped, flinching. Without hesitation, Charles drew her close, arms steady around her waist. "You're all right. I got you." She should have pushed him away. She didn't. Instead, she let her head rest against his chest for a heartbeat too long. When the thunder eased, she stepped back, cheeks burning. "Thank you for holding you," he teased lightly. "Or for helping the horse." "Both," she admitted. Charles looked stunned by her honesty. "Any time, Nancy." The storm finally softened. Rain turned gentle. The Mustang's breathing steadied, and Nancy let out a long, relieved exhale. But inside her chest, a different kind of storm. Raged one, Charles Avery had stirred the moment he rode into her life. Morning sun poured over the ranch like liquid gold. The storm had washed the land clean, leaving the air sharp and fresh. Nancy stepped out of the barn, stretching stiff muscles from a night of tending the Mustang. Charles leaned against the fence, hat tipped low. "Didn't think you'd get me up this early," he teased. "You didn't have to stay," Nancy replied. "I wanted to." Nancy's heart skipped. She turned away before he could see her blush. "Come on, we've got to check the herd." They saddled up, Nancy on her mare, Charles on his bay-end rode, out across the sprawling pastures. The sky was endless, the wind cool against their faces. Nancy hadn't shared a morning ride with someone in years. She'd forgotten how good it felt not to be alone in the quiet. Charles studied her with an easy smile. "You look different today." "Oh," she said cautiously, "like someone who finally slept." She snorted. "Didn't sleep at all. Still beautiful, though." Nancy nearly tripped her horse. "Charles, but it's true." She shook her head, but warmth bloomed inside her chest. They reached a ridge, overlooking the valley, and Charles pointed. "Storm didn't hit as hard down there. Grass is still good." Nancy nodded, admiring the way he assessed the land. "You know you're ranchin'." "Grew up doing it," he admitted. "Left home after I messed up." Nancy looked at him, sensing the weight behind his words. "What happened?" Charles hesitated. "I trusted the wrong folks. Lost the ranch my daddy built." Nancy's breath caught. "Charles, I'm sorry." He shrugged, but his voice was raw. "Been driftin' ever since. Don't stay in one place too long." Nancy frowned. "You don't have to keep running." He looked at her. Then really looked. Maybe not. Maybe there's someone worth staying for. Her pulse stumbled. She stared at the horizon, pretending the sudden rush of emotion didn't shake her. Before she could speak, a sharp cry echoed from below. The Mustang, still weak, had slipped from the barn and stumbled toward the field. Nancy gasped. He shouldn't be walking. They rushed back, racing across the pasture. Dust kicked up as they reached the trembling horse. Nancy slid off her saddle, kneeling beside him. "He's scared," she murmured, stroking his neck. Charles crouched beside her. "Or maybe he was looking for you." Nancy's eyes softened. "He's fightin' to stand, just like someone else I know." Charles swallowed. Their hands met on the Mustang's, withers warm, steady, unplanned. They froze, breath mingling. The world felt impossibly small. "I don't want you to drift away," she whispered before she could stop herself. Charles cupped her cheek gently, thumb brushing her skin. "Then, tell me to stay." Nancy closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "I want you here," she said. The words broke something open, inside both of them. Something tender, hopeful, dangerous. Charles pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist. For the first time in years, she let herself fall. The Mustang neighed softly beside them, as if approving. Under the wide western sky, Nancy Ellery let her heart breathe again. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange fire. Nancy stood outside the barn with Charles, the Mustang grazing peacefully nearby. His recovery had been slow, but steady, just like hers. Charles folded his arms, watching the horse. "He's got spirit. Reminds me of someone." Nancy nudged him. "If you're calling me stubborn, you're right." He laughed, warm and rich. "I'm calling you strong." She swallowed, touched by the softness in his voice. "You gonna keep talking sweet like that, Charles Avery?" "Only if it keeps you smiling like that." Nancy looked away, cheeks warm. But she didn't deny she was smiling. The ranch hands were due back any hour, and Nancy knew the quiet moment wouldn't last. She wanted to say something needed to, but didn't know where to start. Charles beat her to it. "Nancy, I meant what I said out there." He took off his hat, holding it loosely in both hands. "I want to stay, if you'll have me." Her breath caught. "Charles, I ain't got much. No fancy money, no big promises. But I got heart. And it's yours, if you want it." The words hit her like a warm wind, unexpected, overwhelming welcome. Nancy stepped closer, fingers brushing his arm. Not good at letting people in, I know. I'm scared I'll lose 'em. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered. And she believed him. A long, quiet moment stretched between them. Then Charles gently lifted her chin, searching her eyes for permission. She gave it. Their kiss was slow, warm, steady like the setting sun itself. Not rushed, not desperate, just right. The kind of kiss that built futures, not fires that burned out quick. The Mustang snorted nearby, bumping Charles' shoulder with his muzzle, almost jealous. Nancy laughed against his lips. Charles chuckled. Guess he's claiming me too, maybe, she said softly. But I get first claim. Charles wrapped an arm around her waist. Good. I was hoping you'd say that. They walked the Mustang back toward the barn, together, hands brushing, hearts steady. Nancy felt lighter than she had in years, like the walls she'd built weren't cages anymore, but gates she could choose to open. As the last sliver of sun disappeared behind the horizon, Charles stopped and turned to her again. Nancy Ellery, think you and I could build something here? She squeezed his hand. Yeah, I do. The Mustang whinnied. The breeze carried the scent of sage, and Nancy leaned her head gently against Charles' shoulder. Sundown had started their story, but sunrise would build the rest. Charles kissed her temple. Here's to new beginnings, and two people worth staying for, Nancy whispered. They stood together in the fading light, hearts warm, futures bright, sparks still glowing softly in the dusk. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.